Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Hi, and welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Layla.
And I'm Chelle.
And on this episode, we are excited to welcome a modern kitchen witch with a passion for green magic and living in harmony with the land, Lacey Burbage. Lacey is a fourth-generation folk healer, an ordained priestess of the goddess, a teacher, and the creative force behind the cozy, witchy, hearth and home haven that is the Naturally Modern Witch YouTube channel. Lacey specializes in domestic magic. Think hearth, cottage, hedge, green, and kitchen witchery. And she's made it her mission to help witches build practices that are not only magical, but also beautifully integrate into your everyday life. Her work honors the old ways while feeling refreshingly modern and accessible. Today, we'll be chatting with Lacey about her new book, Naturally Modern Magick, her path as a house witch, and how we can all bring more seasonal and soulful magic into our homes. Hi, and welcome to the show, Lacey.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I can't wait to talk about witchcraft.
Us either. It's one of our favorite topics.
Wonderful.
We are going to talk about your latest book, Natural Modern Magick, but we do want to give you a second. Tell us a little bit about Lacey. Tell us about you and your magical journey.
Well, it started, I guess, from birth. My family has always been into old wives' tales, and my mom was always very witchy, and so there was just this sort of air of looking at things differently, and ever since I can remember. And when I was about 5, I found some tarot cards of my mom's, and I'm like, hey, tell me how to play this game. So it started very young, but I've been doing it almost all my life. And now I help witches develop a practice that flows with everyday life and how to learn while practicing, because that's what witchcraft is. It's your practice.
I love that.
Lacey, one of the things that I really loved when I heard about your book and I started finding out about you was I found your YouTube channel, Naturally Modern Witch YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. And you have videos on there about the Wheel of the Year, and you show how you celebrate and what you do in your home. And they are just so magical and just filled with so many little things that people can do in their own lives. You make witchcraft very accessible. Can you tell us about that journey, how you came to do that?
Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. Accessible is definitely what I'm all about, something that flows with your life. And for me, living by the seasons and the moon is that foundation and connecting with your natural world, your region, and your environment, and then taking inspiration from that. So, we use the classic wheel of the wheel. I use those words because that's what people are starting out as, are looking for oftentimes. How do I celebrate Ostara? How do I celebrate, whatever is coming up next? And but what it really is about is taking inspiration from your experience with your environment and how you see magic, how you look at things differently. You're not a witch because you do things differently. You're a witch because you see things differently. You see magic in everyday life. So that's really where the inspiration comes, is what were the things that I felt most magical doing, or that I could see a deeper meaning in, that I was already doing. So I'm already a crafty Martha Stewart type of homemade bread type of person.
I resemble that remark.
I love to be in my garden. I love herbalism. I love all of those things that encompass what we might call domestic magic. So kitchen magic, house magic, and green magic.
I love that term, domestic magic.
Right. But that's just what we are. We're domesticated witches at this point, But that's that witch living on the edge of civilization in the woods. And that's kind of that energy that I feel most connected to. How would I do this if it was just me and connecting to magic? How would I celebrate this? And whatever I was already doing, I would look at the deeper meaning. So it would start very small. I think we were talking oftentimes about, stirring your intention into your tea, brushing your teeth with intention, you're cleansing, or you only want to speak sweet words, or you're eating something and you look at that deeper meaning, that correspondence or symbolism. And so I would do that with my YouTube channel. I would, Lunasa is big for grain. And so if wheat is what calls to you, then do that. But corn is what grows most easily and is native to where I'm at, where I live in Las Vegas in the desert. So that's something that I would try to grow and just learn from that experience and then make something with that type of grain. To me, that was the bigger connection, other than just reading, is to look at the deeper meaning. And so I want to provide ideas and inspiration for people who are crafty, who like to cook, who like to, be in their garden, but also see that deeper connection, that deeper meaning.
One of the things that really stuck out to me about your history was very similar to Chelle and I. You started out very Wiccan based. And we like to laugh and say we have Wiccan DNA.
Yeah.
We don't practice Wicca right now, but it still influences our magical practice in a big way.
Mhm.
And I also resonated with when you said that you moved and found that your new area didn't really follow the same seasons, the same wheel of the year that you were used to. And so that really helped kind of ground you in more of a local animistic type practice. Can you tell us about that journey a little bit?
Yeah, so I like to say my formal studies began in 1999, early 2000, which is I was I don't know, a tween, preteen at the time, so I was quite young. It was not looked at negatively in my household. And my mom got a couple books from Barnes and Noble, that little section they used to have on religion. There was like 7 books on witchcraft and maybe Celtic mythology. And
Right.
I remember her picking up one that was like Wicca 101 or like Complete Idiot's Guide to Wicca, something like that, something really early on. I have it somewhere. It's like an artifact to me now.
I actually have both of those books, just saying.
I think I have both of them too, so I can't remember quite which one she got first. And so she got something like that, and she got Every Woman a Goddess or something about women and goddessy stuff. So those were really the first times I really like read about it. I really truly learned about it. And she didn't take to it as much, but oh, I ate it up. I got onto the internet in the early days on a
The Wild
Witchbox, I
West
think
of
it was.
witchcraft.
Yeah, the Wild West, and found a learning circle and a group, and we'd meet at a coffee shop. And I was the youngest. I was 11, 12. I don't even know at this point. And there were some teenagers there, but they were all older than me, and there were some grown-ups there too. So it was a nice mix. About 10 people we'd gather and we'd read different books and just talk. And it was, very community feeling. And people were quite open, but everyone, I think at the time, most people for the last decade or so had access to Wiccan information. That was what was easily available. And I think even now that's kind of the jumping off point for a lot of people. So I'll often start there if I'm mentoring someone or we're learning about it. We'll use those common terms. Like we speak that language. You were saying you have Wiccan DNA. Like if we speak the language, I speak correspondences. If you told me to go light the candle for air, I'd know where to stand. I'd know go to the east and find the yellow candle, or look for a feather, or look for incense.
Yes, we speak that language too.
Yes.
Yeah, I walk into a room, I know there's a ritual. I'm like, okay, where's my directions? I can look at the altar, I can look at the table.
Yep, we're with you.
Yeah, that plays very heavily into how I write spells. And I wrote the spells in the book and crafted them, or those correspondences, because I learned that from my Wiccan roots. But it is about adapting it. If we're looking at connecting with nature, where is your connection? And so, yeah, I did have to eventually adjust that. Learning spring looks different here. Spring is beautiful in the desert. Come here in May, and it is just gorgeous when you find the wildflowers, but it looks very different in the winter. But you really have to look at those subtle changes. And that's the magic is a big part of it is the presence and observing. That's a lot of witchcraft.
Yes, I'm going to inject real quick. I know Chelle has a question, but coming from the East Coast, I lived in Southern California for a time in the desert. And Joshua Tree is one of my most magical places. But when I first went there, it was so different. It felt so alien. It took a minute, but then once I felt the magic of the land and connected with the life there, it was so amazing. Different, but absolutely stunningly amazing. So I just had to share my love for the desert for just a second.
Actually, I was going to interject. I have not been to the desert, and I'm just going to put that out there, bucket list thing. But I did have a drastic move within the last 5 years that did change my perspective a little bit. I went from the heart of the deep woods of upstate New York, where, forest magic is abound in that location, to Salem, Massachusetts, where water magic was very prevalent here. I'm a mile from the ocean. The wind is a whole different thing. Air itself is different here than it was back in New York. And it just has this different, the only way I can explain it is a different soul.
That's a good way to
I have
put
a
it.
different soul here. So I went from, like that forest witch to kind of like that oceany water witch vibe.
Changes like that happen and we have to adapt to those. And I think,
Yeah.
Lacey, that's a big part of your story is how you adapted to all these changes and beautifully from what it looks like. You have this website and you do teachings as well.
I do. So we have the Naturally Modern Witch Coven on Patreon. So that encompasses the Naturally Modern Witch calendar, which that's free. Anyone can sign up and grab that calendar. It's like one witchy thing you can do every day to connect to your craft and, live a little more magically. But the Patreon has the coven, and that's where we get into more resources with living by the seasons and the moon. And then I'll do periodic mentorships. So sometimes it will be on Patreon, sometimes it'll be one-on-one, sometimes it'll be boot camp kind of style and group. It kind of depends. I'll send out newsletters and kind of ask people what they want.
Now, to kind of jump over to the book, Naturally Modern Magick, the essential compendium of spells and rituals for health, happiness, and prosperity. I love how you almost start from scratch and going through the book is like a work through, like a progression. What inspired you to make this beautiful thing? Because I do have to also point out that visually, I love this book more than any book I have seen in a very, very long time. For someone who sometimes has a hard time sitting down and swallowing a whole book, just visually, this makes me want to turn the page and turn the page. You've got little graphics and little pictures and the pop-up ideas. I love your little pop-up ideas. What inspired the book and kind of the format that you went? Because I love that more than anything I've seen in a long time.
Thank you. That's quite a compliment. It really has come together beautifully. Visually, what I was most inspired by is a scrapbook, like a junk journal sort of feeling.
That's what it reminds me of.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. And so I remember when I was talking with the publishers and early on, they had a certain vision and I wasn't sure how much I could speak up. And I've learned to advocate for myself now.
Yes, that's a great lesson.
It is. This has been quite a lesson, a beautiful lesson. So in the beginning, I took a couple pictures of some scrapbooks and books that were put together in that sort of style. And I told them, this is what I'm most inspired by. And even before that, in 2019, maybe 2020, so when I first started really diving into this and offering teachings and things like that. So I put together ebooks and I'd have it in that sort of style where it looked like this was my witch's journal. I just opened it up and you saw a page of me nature journaling and there's a pressed flower in there, or you flipped it over and there's a sketch of a bug or some symbol in my coffee when I was interpreting clouds of creamer. You just flipped through my journal is what I wanted it to feel like. And how it's laid out the way that it is, I wanted it to be something that you learned witchcraft while you were practicing it, because so many of us get wrapped up in consuming information. And there's no shortage of information. We just need to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
So the introductions before every spell is to tell you this does this does that. This is why we're using it. And then if you don't have an ingredient, that's okay. We're just stacking the odds in your favor by layering all these things together. So if you don't have it, omit it, do what feels right, or flip to the substitutions in the back. So we started with what was the bare bones. Let me tell you about grounding. Let me tell you about protection. And we moved through anything that I thought would go through your life. I wanted it to be a spell book is like a cookbook. So I wanted it to be a go-to. You needed a recipe for cooked chicken. You pull your favorite cookbook out and you flip to a recipe for cooked lemon chicken. And so you need a spell to get your dream job. You need a spell to attract the right love. You need a spell to stop gossip. You need a spell to protect yourself while you're on a road trip. I wanted them to be everyday situations that we all go through. And you just flip to it.
But I like how, you kind of have like like you said, we get so consumed with info overload that, okay, now that I've downloaded all this info into my brain, now what do I do with it? I like how you have small chunks of very important information you need to know about this particular thing. Now let's put it into practice.
I very much enjoyed how it does look like a scrapbook cookbook to me. And I like the colored tabs at the top where you can see all the different sections very easily. One of the things that you said about doing magic is something that Chelle and I think is very important is we think even if you're not going to do it right or you don't think you're going to do it the right way, do it. Get messy, get dirty. First of all, I loved your dedication, I think it was in the book. It was so fun and so cute and so personal.
I want to hang out with your brother, by the way, because of the dedication. I need to
Yeah.
meet this person.
Oh, his name is Donnie Burbage. He's a guitar player. You can find him online. He's in a couple bands, and some of them are kind of really well known in their genre.
Well,
Nice.
awesome. Shout out to
Nice.
Donnie Burbage. I'll have to check
Yeah,
that
he's
out.
quite an inspiration.
Nice. I love my brothers too. I have four of them and we get along very well. So I'm a big fan of brothers. But I did like your dedication to your dad. I wanted to call this out because he had a saying to shoot for the stars. And if you make it over the trees,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that because you really should try. Even if you don't think you're going to get to the stars, you still need to try and you still need to try to do it. And not making it to the stars doesn't mean that you failed. It just means you learned something. It means you learned what to do next time. It means you got as far as the top of the trees. There's so much there. And I think magic needs to be less. I mean, there needs to be the cerebral part. You need that part. But you also need to get messy. Witchcraft is being outside. It's being in the woods. It's walking through the mud.
It's trial and
making
error.
recipes. Yeah, it's doing all.
Yeah.
It's living. It's being alive, and that can be messy. And I think we need to embrace that a little bit. How do you add that process of not being afraid to make mistakes or not being afraid to not quite reach the stars? How do you work with that in your magic?
I'd say my biggest lesson that I've learned and where I learned that from in experience, in my experiences with gardening, especially out here in the desert. I love a good garden, but it has taken me quite some time. And I think I
Yeah,
talked
that's a
about this a little
challenge.
bit. Yeah, a little bit in the book. And at one point I looked around and everything was dead
Shell,
and
I
dry.
feel that. I feel
Shell
that.
can relate.
And I thought, oh gosh, this could be really defeating. But looking at it a little bit longer, I thought, well, this probably could have gone over there and gotten better sun or less sun. And this probably needed, or maybe if I companion plant with some shade, or this might have needed more water. I definitely didn't water this enough. I thought this isn't a yard full of dead plants. This is a yard full of lessons.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
So again, you're just looking at that deeper meaning, deeper lesson, and everything has seasons. And so even looking at those dry, crispy plants, at one point I realized maybe this is just the plant season. Is this an annual or perennial? Does it die down and come back? Is this just what early fall looks like in the desert? We don't have leaves falling, but we have things getting dry and crispy. Maybe this is just that cycle, and this is what it looks like here. So try something, see how it feels, see how it works. And then what is the deeper meaning? What is the thing? What is the magic? To me, magic is what connects you to the divine, whatever that is for you. And so what is that thread? What can we learn? Because that's a lot of what magic is that's the wisdom and the knowledge, the difference between just taking in information and knowing what to do with it.
I have another question. I was also taking a look at your website, and on it you have a Beltane love spell cake.
Yes.
And part of that recipe is for some lavender honey butter.
Yes.
Oh,
I think that's on
my.
YouTube now too.
So delicious, so good. Just the lavender honey butter. How fun to mix a little magic into that and drizzle that on my love's toast or, on a little bit of something sweet to eat and just kind of add a little bit of that I love you magic to it. So what's your favorite way to add, I love you to food?
I would say the go-to that I do the most is stirring in intention. So clockwise to attract or something like that. And I use numerology or numbers a lot. So things in threes or 3 dashes of salt or 3 dashes of whatever that ingredient might be that I'm using. You just, you look at that thing. How I do it with food, I'll tell you the method that my brain goes through is if I look at a recipe or I think of a couple ingredients in any meal that I'm making. So pick one meal that week, pick one ingredient from that meal, and then learn about it like it's one of your magical tools that you're studying. And eventually you'll use it enough, you'll develop a relationship with that ingredient. It'll become what I call spiritual kin. So it's no longer a tool, it's that relationship.
That's fantastic. I love that.
So if you use Italian seasoning a lot, well, pick one or all the ingredients in Italian seasoning and learn about them. And that becomes your kitchen witch practice. But then you can take that to green magic and use those herbs in other spells.
You can even get those little arrow gardens, I think, that have like Italian seasoning pods that you can just grow in your little arrow garden on
Yeah,
your counter. That would be fun.
yeah,
Layla
absolutely.
mentioned love magic. I have a question. I feel like everybody's looking for a love spell. How am I going to get this person, get the person I love, whatever the case may be? It's a buzzword, always has been. I want to point out that I love the fact that your love and relationship section was more towards the back of your book. And B, I want to ask, did you feel compelled to have to add something about love and relationships because it is such a hot thing?
Interesting question. I I added it because it just seemed like something that people would go through. So I would
Okay.
start there. And I was very careful not to include anything that was a love spell on a specific person.
Mm.
Because if I had to look back on the people I would have cast love spells on, I would have picked wrong.
Hey, I'm in that club too.
So that's one of those things I say you give it up to the universe, you give it up to mystery or whatever your divine essence is for you, that I might pick wrong. Something out there might know better. And so oftentimes I like to end spells with this or something better or some clause that, okay, this is what I'm communicating that I see with my mental world and my physical world. And maybe I'm not as connected to the spirit world to see what something else sees. So this is what I have. I think I want with the resources that I have, but let it be this or something better. And I trust that. That's that trust fall, which is difficult, but there is a part of that to magic. We don't need to control everything. Sometimes we need to let it happen. I mean, we've all been through an eclipse.
I like that statement that we don't need to control everything because I think that sometimes people think that doing magic is controlling.
Do you, Shell, my control freak friend?
Yeah.
I am a control freak friend, but you can't use magic to control everything, I guess is my point. And I like that you kind of convey that.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting part is there is a spell to keep you from wanting to control situations.
Let go and let the
I'm
universe, right?
skipping that page.
So it's a bit of a spiral down the circle there, down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, Shell's not going to go down that one.
I think with spells and rituals, in a way, they help you to release. I've recently done a lot of work with my cognitive function and limiting beliefs and things like that. And I think that's very important to tapping into your focused intention when doing spell work or any type of magic, that you can really ground and center your energy and be able to focus on the feeling that you want in the circle at that time or in your working at that time.
That guides your intention.
Yes, yes. And being able to sort of get out of that monkey mind and to release and trust that you've done what you can. I think spell work really helps with that. We have that symbolic action and we have that communication, and magic is what ties you to the divine. So you have that symbolic action and that communication with your divine essence when you're doing spells and rituals and charms. It's not so much trying to control the outcome as in communicate.
As much as Shell really liked that the love spells were at the end, I very much enjoyed that your energy work, grounding and centering, you talk about that very in depth at the beginning, and you
Was
give
front and
people
center. Yeah.
was front and center because that's so important. It's so important
It's
in
kind of the foundation to everything you're going to do from that point on, I feel.
yeah, and you have charms to ground, you have cleansing ideas in here, and you really give people a great grounding in how to ground and how to work with that energy, how to center yourself. Because if you can't ground and center and raise that energy, it's very difficult to then direct it and try to work your will that way. So I love that you had that front and center right there. Now, speaking of cleansing, I noticed that as a domestic witch, as a hearth and home witch, now Shell and I talk about this. We tend to talk about the wheel of the year. We do a lot of cleansing, whether it's an altar, whether it's our whole house. And you talk about that a lot on your channel and your website. So I have a personal question. Do you have sitting around your house any unlabeled bottles of moon water, and what do you do with them?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just us.
Yeah, I've gotten better over the years. I used to have everything unlabeled because, of course, I'm going to remember this. I don't need to
Hell
write it
yeah.
That's
down.
what we say.
And usually, if it's a plant or an herb, I'll be able to smell it and go, oh, okay, that's mint. Okay. I know what this is. Water is hard. You don't really know where it came from. But at the very least, I will use it to wash clothes. I'll put it in my laundry.
Ooh,
So if I don't know how long it's been around, I don't might not want to consume it or something like that. I'll at least put it in my laundry. That helps. The best tip I probably have with moon water is to freeze it. Put it in ice
okay.
cubes and freeze it and keep it in your freezer. That way, if you wanted to drink it or something like that. I like to do sprays. I like to put it in my water and drink it and do things like that. So, it's a little bit safer. And then you have ice cubes. So if you might brew iced coffee, like you brew your hot coffee into ice cubes. I've done that before. Then you've got moon water in your ice cubes. So that's a helpful little tip too.
I
Or you could
like
do
that.
ice on your face and it's moon water. So I find ice, freezing your moon water to be really handy.
I have a problem though. See, I have I think 9 bottles, all unlabeled. And I do remember that one of them that I feel like is in a Snapple bottle, but I have a few of those too, was from this worst chaotic thunder and lightning storm. It was the first big storm when I moved to Salem.
Mhm.
And I'm afraid to open any of these Snapple bottles because I don't know which one has that chaotic energy in it.
Hmm.
I would probably sit with each of them and see how they energetically feel to you before you use them for anything.
Yes, that's a good one. I would do that. And then if you still were a little unsure, maybe probably put a little salt in them,
Oh,
slightly crack
yeah.
open the lid and just real careful.
To kind of calm those energies down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd probably do that.
I'll have to try that. I'll have to try that.
Then use it to clean the area under your least favorite coworker's chair. Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, you could spin it the other route. Yeah.
You never know what'll happen. It could be
No
good.
judgment. We're just saying.
We're just saying. All right, so I'm glad to know we're not the only ones with a few unlabeled jars of things kicking
A
around.
few is an understatement.
Yeah, I always say I'm going to remember, and then I never do.
Never,
But
ever.
I'm getting a little better.
Now, if you had to give one piece of starting advice to someone who came to you and said, "Look, I am very new to witchcraft. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to look at. I don't know what to read." What is your advice to a very new witch?
The first thing you need to ask yourself is if you are looking for a new religion or spiritual belief, or if you're looking for a new practice, because you can practice witchcraft and magic no matter your religion or spiritual belief. So you need to decide where you want to start. Do you want to start with learning about symbolism, correspondences, and practice? Do you want to start learning about spiritual beliefs and religion? Do you want to do a little bit of both?
That's actually a good answer. I like that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And is there a particular spell or exercise that you do teach your students first? Is there something that you give them to work with in the beginning?
The first thing we work with is their personal daily rhythm and then learning about deeper meaning. Because if you're trying to make your practice fit into everyday life, even if you've never done any type of witchcraft or magic or studied anything, you need to understand how you work. Are you a morning person or are you a night person? I'm a morning person, so I like to do a lot of my stuff early as the sun is rising. So there are certain correspondences with different times of day or when your energy is feeling different ways. You're going to know your rhythm and your schedule. So that's one of the first things that I get people to look into when they're sort of evaluating before we get started. And then deeper meaning. So the idea of deeper meaning started when I read a book called How to Read Literature Like a Professor. And a part of it, they explain that when you're reading, for example, mythology, or you're reading different bits of literature and stuff like that, to look at the symbolism. So in this case, what is the collective symbolism and what is the personal symbolism that you have with things that might show up in your life? So if a butterfly passes you by, we might use that as your subject and say, what is the symbolism there? Butterfly is pretty common that it's transformation, but maybe you have a particular connection to butterflies. And then that comes to memory. What are your memories associated with this? And then pattern? Where is it showing up over and over again? Because that's going to help you, one, really tune into your awareness, your presence, your natural environment, and energies around you. And then it's also going to help you learn to interpret signs and symbols in the future if that's something that you get more into. And also, it's going to help you learn about correspondences. So it's going to help you learn about different energies with your tools, which will hopefully become your spiritual camp.
Are you big on getting your students and your mentorees to journal?
I was just going to say, I heard journaling all over that.
Yes, but we do mostly do nature journaling. So we start with nature journaling, and you'll pick a subject and you'll look at the deeper meaning of that subject. So maybe you pick a tree that's outside and you study it for an entire year, and each season you learn something from that tree. And that eventually becomes your seasonal wheel, or your witch's wheel, your Wiccan wheel of the year. You eventually create your own.
Nice. I love that. That really brings it to local, personal. That really brings it down to you. I love that so
And it
much.
also kind of gives folks, I love it because it gives folks the sense of what a butterfly may mean to me, maybe something completely different to you. So it's taking that download of information that's so wonderful, but then personalizing it to what does this mean to me personally? How do I feel personally? How does this affect me personally? And kind of give it that spin. I love that.
Yes, absolutely. And then the other thing I would say with beginners, in terms of reading books, there are certain books that I recommend, and it's more along the lines. I say read the How to Read Literature Like a Professor. That's one of the first ones I say to read. The next one I would say is, I think it's A History of Witchcraft and Magic, and something that's a good, well-rounded bit of a timeline of magic and witchcraft, so that you can see that it's been practiced throughout history and time, and every single belief system in some form. There's just different rules around who and for what reason they want you to practice it. So those two are really good foundations. And then if you want to get practicing, I'd say my book's probably another good one, so that you can actually get your hands, going, get your
Dirty.
hands dirty.
Yeah. I liked how you said that you talk to your students about the rhythm of their day and what their day looks like. Because in magic, all of it is cycles. The wheel of the year is the wheel of the month, is the wheel of the day, is, the cycle of you. And it reminded me a book that I read when my kids were little was called Seven Times the Sun. And it's about finding daily rhythms with your children. And not a pagan book. I believe Shay Darian is the author, but not a pagan book. But I think finding those rhythms and finding what you do naturally during the day that you can make magical, that you can make part of your practice, helps to make it easier to do. If you're trying to do something completely out of the norm to you, completely out of your cycles and your rhythms, you're less likely to keep doing it. That's why if you cook every day, cook a little magic into that, work a little magic into that. Are there any things that you do during the day that used to be quote unquote normal or mundane that are now magical for you? Is there anything like that in your daily practice?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd say once I really started sort of grounding into, I call it the naturally modern witch method. And I looked at what I did to get more connected to my craft and have a practice that just really flowed. And then I wrote it all out sort of bullet point style, like, okay, step one, what did I do? Step two, what did I do? And then I repeated it a couple times. And then I had some friends try it out, and they're like, yeah, okay, all right, this is, easy. And what I learned is, yes, everyone has their own flow. Magic energy works on cycles and rhythms, just like you were saying. And what we oftentimes will do is it just becomes repetitive. We kind of go on autopilot. And that can be good. You can really clear your mind when you're taking a shower, or you're just washing the dishes and not thinking about anything, but because you're doing an automatic task. But life shouldn't be automatic. Life shouldn't be. So being more present. One thing that I think we talked about cleansing, that I find really helpful is to look at that correspondence with things that are cleansing. So when is water being used? Washing the dishes, like we just said, or taking a shower. You can make that into a cleansing ritual. If you're doing something with your hair, braiding it or putting it up in a certain way, if you're already wearing a hat that day, if you need to shield yourself energetically, then those things can be really helpful. I like to have I'm not wearing it today. I just put my hands up here thinking I was wearing it. I have a pendant that is the Star of Inanna, and then it's got the moon cycles around it. And I was working on sort of a time of self-love when I got that. And I sort of got this download or this message that was I needed something that made me feel sacred. So that's something that I always charge in the moonlight, and I wear it every day, or I put moon water on it, I anoint it. So I know I'm wearing that regularly. I include that in my practice. I know I'm showering regularly. Let's make it into a spell. Some parts of the book, you'll see a recipe. And my editor even sent me an email about it. She said, I just realized this is fire cider. And I'm like, yeah, because I make it every year. So let's make it into a healing spell. All
Nice.
those things, you can look at it and make it into a spell. If you first learn the deeper meaning, you start to look at those correspondences and the symbolism, you can make all of life magical. You can make everything a magical working or a ritual.
Well, make your whole life naturally modern magic.
Yeah, be the witch next door.
Well, I aspire to be the crazy witch in the woods, but witch next door works too. Either one, either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are finding we live in this modern life, but we have that connection, we have that yearning, that pull to natural magic, to connecting with nature in some way. But we live in front of screens.
Yeah, but this book definitely gives folks a good idea to how to bridge that gap.
Thank you so much, Lacey, for joining us. Your book comes out March 25th, I believe.
No, it's out. It came out March 3rd. I think they moved the date up. So it's just released.
The book is out. You can get that anywhere you get books. You can also check out Lacey at her YouTube, at her website. We will put links to all of that in the show description. Lacey, any last words of wisdom?
Oh, I would just want to echo what you said. Just do it. Just get your hands dirty, get into it. Just start doing magic. You deserve it. Start doing witchcraft. You deserve it.
Oh my gosh, yes, I love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lacey.
Thank you. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much to Lacey Burbage and Red Wheel Weiser. And thank you all for listening to this episode of Back on the Broomstick. Please like, subscribe, leave us a review. We really appreciate it, and it helps the show out. If you'd like to get in touch with us, email us at backonthebroomstick@gmail.com. You can also send us some snail mail. The information is in the show description. Thank you all again, and we will see you next week. Be wise, be wicked, and don't forget to keep it witchy.